Filtering. We're now live, folks. Welcome.
This is exciting.
Yeah. Got
Folks are coming in.
some friends out there. Tom, good to see you. Shay, Chris, our new team members here at Opensense joining us. We'll kick this thing off in just a minute. If you guys have any questions while we're warming up, while we're practicing our ums and uhs and getting rid of them, if you want to, drop us some questions in the chat, in the Q&A section. Love to see them. We'll get to them as soon as we can. All right, we got a good number of folks who have filtered in. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk through some really exciting stuff. Sarah, just stoked we finally got to do this.
Me too.
Right. Okay. Welcome everybody. I'm joined here by Sarah Brazier from Gong, Rex Biberston from Opensense. And we're going to talk about a thing that we love probably more than most things in the world, which is sales. You know, Sarah, you and I were just talking before this about how you weren't always in sales. I'm just curious, before we jump into this whole thing, what got you into it? What ultimately got you over the hump into sales?
Already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my whole adult life, I'd been told by various salespeople, you should really do sales. You'd be really good at it. And I mean, I did a bunch of stuff. I worked for a nonprofit. I was a teacher. I attempted to be an actor.
Nice.
Yeah, I was doing a bunch of stuff, and the whole time that was going on in the back of my head, and I thought, yeah, I probably could do sales. So I'll put that in my back pocket if all these other things just don't work out. And eventually I was, working as a barista, I would open up the coffee shop at 5 a.m. or leave my house at like 4:30, I think. I think I had to be there at 4:30, and we opened the shop at 5. And I was doing that, and then I was also working as the secretary at a startup. And I was doing rehearsals and acting in the evening. And I thought, man, I still can't afford lunch. So maybe I should get a real job. And I met Jim Jones at the time he was at Optimizely. And he introduced me to what an SDR was. And that's how I got started.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure so many of our attendees today who are in sales could raise their hand and say, heck yeah, I have a story just like that. I was an English major in college. I love to write. I was applying to master's PhD programs, combined programs. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do this my senior year. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this anymore. And I had gotten into sales and marketing, and I found that I loved it and just kind of went that direction. But door to door sales, I've done everything. And so it's fun. It's fun to see how sales careers transform over time. I think today we're going to talk about some things that you started learning as an SDR, have carried over really well into your role as an account executive at Gong, but also I think apply top and bottom funnel of sales. You know, we're going to talk about a lot of really cool tactics we can deploy and some of your experiences, which I personally know. So for everybody here, I'm a believer in Gong, believer in Sarah. She cold contacted me, actually sold us on the platform, did a great job. Through some social listening, did some really intelligent stuff. We're gonna break down that story today, but we'll also break down how you can deploy similar tactics for yourselves, and then how we can use some similar ideas at the bottom of the funnel, how we can pay attention, how just listening, paying attention, recalling certain information, and looking at the signals is going to help us win more deals. So let's jump into this bad boy.
I'm excited.
All right, I don't know how many of you are going to be offended by this, but most sales reps are lazy. Right. And that's not really necessarily true. We're actually stuck in a rut quite commonly with all of the things we could be doing, especially if you're a full cycle rep. I mean, there's top of funnel, bottom of funnel. There's so much activity you need to be performing, so many metrics you're being tracked on, so many things you're being measured by. And so we often get stuck in this rut, even though we have all the technology in the world. We live in this incredible freaking age of so much technology to make it easier for us to reach out to and have conversations with and ultimately convert into paying relationships with customers. So I think it's an incredible time, but we get stuck and, we often just say, well, it's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else's responsibility. It's somebody else's job to enable me. But the best sales professionals go above and beyond. They do a little extra. They think differently. It's not even necessarily that they work the longer hours, that they come in early, they stay late. Now, Sarah, I think from your experience, you were mentioning to me a few days ago how this is actually something, you deployed some of these tactics to hit your quota well before end of month. I don't know, does that ring true for you that you were able to do something different and stand out that didn't require you being such a hard worker, but maybe a little bit smarter?
100%. I think once you figure out what the process is and the levers to pull, there are ways to be much smarter about how you go about prospecting and how you run a sales cycle. Um, and for me, that as an SDR, once I figured out the little triggers that I needed to pull, the reports I would get, how I would go about opening up a cold call, where I would find my leads, it allowed me to just have the snowball effect of every month I would make my focus on hitting quota within the first 2 weeks. And so when I'm finishing out week 3, I'm prospecting into the next month. And so it's just building on top of each other so that by
Yeah.
the end of my first month as an SDR at Gong, I had hit quota like less than 9 months into the role for my
Hmm.
yearly quota. And then everything else was just gravy.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think a little bit of it here that we're trying to call out is not just we can give you a bunch of cool tactics, but there's actually a mindset shift there, right? Which is I need to hit it my first 2 weeks so that I can set up for the next one. It's not so that I can take 2 weeks of vacation, but it is I need to get it ahead of time. I just need to shift slightly how I'm working this angle, how I'm working on a monthly rhythm. And if I can get ahead of it, then I'm always ahead of it. If I can just stay on top of this thing, which I think is true of all prospecting, all selling, it's not like we get ahead so that we can stop. We keep going. Sales is a continual motion. We reset at zero every month, every quarter, every year. And that can be frustrating, but I think it's also exciting if you're ahead of it. So hearing that story, let's dig into some of the things that you did at the top of the funnel. There's a couple of places that I think we're gonna share some really good insights. One, conversational signals, right? This could be in live conversation or observing conversation over like social media, places where people will publish things. And then engagement signals for identifying things like better timing, better follow-up. So let's dig into the first tactic here. We're calling it the social watcher, right? There's a lot of information on here. You're going to get a playbook. Those of you who attend or watch the recording, you're going to get a playbook where you can actually run these yourselves. But this is an example of a way that we can just pay attention to what someone else is saying publicly and take advantage of that. So Sarah, talk to us a little about, you don't have to use the details here because everyone can take action on this later, but talk to us a little bit about what it means to pay attention in social media, to notice and then take advantage of those situations.
Yeah. I've run whole webinars just on this specific piece. Um, the way that I structure how I go about prospecting is I build out lists on LinkedIn, whether it's on LinkedIn Sales Navigator or just LinkedIn itself, and I follow people that are prospects. So the way that I prospected you is Opensense was in my book of accounts that I just received as a brand new AE.
Nice.
And I looked at your company. I said, this is a growing startup. It's definitely in our ICP. I'm not exactly sure how big the sales team is, but I think this could work. So I followed you. I followed you on Sales Nav, and then every day I just go in and I just scroll through my lead list and the content that they were posting on LinkedIn. Because I am a big believer that prospect people where they live. So
Yeah.
if all of your prospects are on Instagram, then you shouldn't be prospecting on LinkedIn. You should be on Instagram or Twitter
Yeah.
or wherever. I just happen to sell to sales leaders. We're all on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Pretty convenient targets.
Yeah. So I saw that you posted about cold calling. I thought, I'm going to cold call this guy. And I wanted you to know that the cold call was coming. So first I commented on your post.
Yep.
Then I called you and you didn't pick up. And then I called you again and you didn't pick up. And then I commented again on your post, making a joke about how you were hard to reach, I think. I can't remember
Yep.
exactly what I said.
Yep.
But then you had responded to me or liked my response back. And so I just jumped into the DMs and I thought, worst case scenario is you're going to tell me, no, not interested. Best case scenario is you'll take a meeting and we'll actually schedule time for me to give you the pitch that I'm trying to give you in this cold call.
Yeah.
So instead of getting a 5-minute cold call, I got a 45-minute time with you to run a proper discovery, do a demo, and figure out what our next steps were. And it was really exciting. It's always exciting when that happens.
Yeah. It's a really good feeling to get a yes. I think there's a few themes we need to pull out from this because one is consistency. You already mentioned before we got into this tactic, but it's not a silver bullet. You have to consistently be looking. First of all, you have to do the work. You have to go follow the people. You have to go read through some of the content. You have to stay up on that because you might have missed the signal for me about cold calling. Granted, I talk a lot about cold calling. I'm a particular fan of talking about sales prospecting, those sorts of things. But you're going to find that only occasionally some people will post or some people will comment, that it's not going to be all the time. You did not luck out. You did the work. You stayed consistent. You paid attention. You captured my attention. And I'm sure this happened on many, many more occasions. I was not the first person or the last person that you hit up via LinkedIn because of something that they shared. So just want to call out here, you got to be consistent. You have to pay attention. And then another thing is persistence, right? The worst thing that could happen was I would say, no, thank you, right? Like I certainly wasn't going to tell you to buzz off or be super rude because we were already kind of having a conversation over social media. It couldn't be terrible. The outcome couldn't be awful. And even the worst outcomes in sales are like not life or death, right? So ultimately you were persistent. You tried multiple channels. So this is not, hey, go pay attention to someone on social media, make a comment and you're donezo. Like you got a meeting booked. That's pretty rare. So there's a few different things that I pulled out from there. Anything else you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I think that if you build that into your process and you have a list of accounts, um, just spending time on their LinkedIn page, reading about the individual, how do they describe themselves? I think one of the key points is that you want to take something that your prospect cares about and that they identify with. So with you, I talked about cold calling and improving cold calls and SDR outbound tactics on the phone because
Yeah.
that's where Gong could be helpful. But um, if, for instance, you were posting about sales and marketing strategy and how they need to work together, that would probably be the use case that I would cold call about or that I would have messaged you about. Um,
Yeah.
so it's kind of looking at what kind of content did people post and figuring out how they describe their role, figuring out how they describe themselves in that role, and using that to say, hey, all of these things line up with this specific value proposition that I have and that I know people just like you have found value from. Is it
Yep.
worth a conversation? Is it a terrible idea to chat?
Yeah. That's very, was that Chris Voss tactic? Is it a terrible idea? That feels very familiar. I love it. Well, let's talk about maybe the more advanced version of this, which is, let's suppose that they're not so active on social media, which is extremely, if you don't sell to sales and marketing, it's extremely common that you don't, maybe you make the excuse they're not on social media. They're on social media. Like this is 2021. They're on social media somewhere. But if you don't feel like you're finding a lot of relevant information, or maybe they're pretty private with their settings, you don't have a lot that you can do there. There's other places. Now we call it the Social Watcher Advanced. It's just a fun name for it, but it's really about going and gathering intelligence from other sources online that you didn't have a direct conversation about, but you can gather some intelligence from. So I know you've had a lot of success, even in the enterprise, which is, of course, we love the big whale hunting idea. So maybe talk us through a story of where you were able to generate some interest through information you found online that wasn't through social media.
Sure, that's how I built all my sequences in enterprise. Um, the first thing that I do is in the beginning of a quarter is I just go find the quarterly earnings calls
Hmm.
that my prospects were having. And I would look at um, there's a tool called Sentio, which allows you to see this. It's actually, I think, for like people who are watching the stock market and trying to figure out how they invest. But somehow I ended up getting a hold of the tool and
Nice.
on like a 3-month pilot or something. And I was like, I'm gonna use this until until my license expires.
Yep.
But I could go through and read all the transcripts. And so I would do that. So quarterly earnings calls, investor relations calls, that's a great place because that's stuff that's top of mind and it's coming down from the tippy top, that these initiatives are stuff that our company has to do in order to be successful.
Yeah.
Um, Seeking Alpha is a good one. Cheetah IQ also does that. But essentially just go there and I just search the transcript literally for the word revenue. And I just see, how are they talking about generating revenue? What are the motions that they have in play? Do they have any product releases? And then I would build out a sequence around a specific use case that the CEO had described to the investors as a way that they were going to make percentage of ARR.
Yeah.
And then I'd use that as my sequence and I'd use that for the reason for my call and I'd use that for all of my outreach until either the next quarterly earnings call came out or something I learned something interesting. So I'd use that to get my foot in the door and
Yeah.
then I'd have this big cold call list of like 30 different sales leaders from the company that I'd go through. and I would start talking to people and start hearing what their take was on the initiative that I was asking about. And I'd take those calls and I'd use it to build out my next sequence, my next like level of pain, where,
Mhm.
okay, now I know that, this specific aspect of this initiative is what people are really focused on. And then on social media, I would connect with all of the sales reps at that company that followed Gong. So I would talk bottoms down, as an individual contributor, how is this affecting you? How is your manager talking to you about these initiatives? And I'd use that to build out another piece of my sequence. So it's just like constantly going back and saying, this is important to you. Great. I'm going to use that as building blocks. So I was able to do that, and I could source tons of meetings with the company and help my account executive multi-thread that way. And I was also feeding her all of this data and information of this research that I was doing up front, which allowed her to have smarter discovery calls, which allowed her to generate interest, drive urgency, and move deals forward. It was so much fun. I
Yeah, I know. I love it.
love.
My old business partner, the first company I founded, he used to call a tactic that you buried in there that we don't have in the playbook, but that everybody should pay attention to here. It's called surrounding the target. Right? The idea that there's not one entry point. You just said 30 sales leaders, right? Maybe these are very large enterprise companies. They got a ton of sales leaders, but then not just leaders, salespeople, the professionals on the front lines. What could you learn from them? What intelligence could you gather there? But it's really hard to do that when you're coming up with a new pitch every single time for 30 people. But I love the idea of taking what you learned from paying attention, from listening to those quarterly earnings calls, listening to what they're saying on social media, and you're able to use that as the theme throughout until you learn something new. Because it's, if they're ignoring you, if you're not breaking through, they're not saying no, they're probably just not paying attention, right? There's no reason to go jumping around coming up with 100 pitches for 30 different people. That's 3,000 pitches. My gosh, like you would never end preparing to do selling, which is super cool to see how you're able to take that theme and apply it to so many different people. That's awesome. That's a great breakdown. But I would just emphasize to everyone, you still have to surround the target. You still have to do the work. You can't just pay attention to one thing and hope that that's the silver bullet. Awesome. This is a different technique for the top of the funnel, right? And I'm going to break it down because it's something that I'm particularly passionate about. We happen to have at Opensense, we have some pretty advanced analytics for our own email tracking. So we watch what happens after a conversation. And one of my favorite reps from InsideSales.com, early in my career, sales tech company, now called Zant, he would just, all he had to do to hit his quota every month as an SDR was go to people who had previously held meetings, turned into an opportunity and didn't win, or who had scheduled meetings and never held the meetings. And he hit quota in 2 weeks. And then I think he took a week off, right? Like he was very relaxed about it, but he was always ahead of the game. He kind of found this secret vein of gold. But in a similar way, a lot of us have email engagement tracking to some degree right now, right? If you're on HubSpot or Salesforce, you might have Inbox, you might have any of those number of tools. But if you can see that things are happening with old communication, it's like one of the best intent signals ever that now's probably the time to reach out. Now, there's something about speed to lead to be said here. In fact, I think Zant just put out a brand new report on speed to lead still being very important these days. But I think there's something to be said for waiting an hour or two, because often we'll see the alerts coming through on email like, hey, this old prospect who's no longer, in an active deal with you, they're paying attention to something, like they're doing something with your emails. And then we'll get a note from them saying, hey, it's been a while, looks like now's the time to re-engage. Much better if they come to us, right? We're not going to them being needy or anything, but it's always a good opportunity for us to say, all right, if they're not doing anything directly to us, maybe we should go have a conversation with them and source it. Have you seen anything like that? And maybe over social media or over email or other channels?
100%. I told you a story the other day. I'll retell it, but um, I I'm I was in this deal. I'm in this deal, big one. It's worth a lot of money to me. And I'm going back and forth with the CEO, and the CEO keeps telling me that he is going to go evaluate my competitor if I don't give him better pricing.
Yep. Good
and
threat.
and 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 I've we've run really deep discovery. He's told me that this is like $1 million problem. It's really like the specific challenges that he has. I know for a fact that my solution is going to be better than anybody else on the market at figuring out his specific needs. If it
Yep.
was something else, I might be like, okay, have fun. So I told him that. I was like, listen, like we're going to be able to solve your problem X, Y, and Z ways that our competitor can't. Here's the exact questions that I would ask them if you go demo. I didn't tell him don't go demo. I was like, here's the questions you can ask on your demo. And I've given you the best pricing I can possibly give. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think at one point I said, you've taken both my kidneys and left me on a dialysis machine. Like,
Nice.
we're like, I'm holding the line.
Yeah.
So we're going back and forth, back and forth. Finally, I'm just like, hey, listen, like if if pricing is the main reason that you're making this decision, and it's not these other challenges that you're having that this competitor is not going to be able to solve for you, then like there's nothing more I can do. Like maybe it's best if we shake hands and part ways friends now. But if there's a world where you want to dive into the competitive differentiation and explore that and understand why this like delta in pricing is the way it is, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Yeah.
And I know, and he forwarded my email because I use Outreach, and Outreach tells me how many opens I get.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who it was sent to,
Yeah.
but in like 10 minutes, it was opened 55 times. So either I like totally fell flat on my face or it went really well. But I think it was the latter because he got back to me and he was like, I need another demo.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Yeah, those are the signals that you have to interpret as a sales professional, right? Which is like, did I totally botch this one, or did I do something right? But either way, it's signals, right? You got to be paying attention. You got to do something with the information you have. So I think that's a great story. That's awesome to hear. Let's go talk about bottom of funnel now, because we'll get through the bottom of funnel. We'll leave some time open for Q&A, and I think some people are going to have a lot of questions about how you run top of funnel, because it's one of the more challenging things in sales, right? When people are interested, when you're qualifying, when you're competing, there's a whole different set of skills. But at the top of the funnel, that's freaking challenging. Getting attention in a busy market's tough. So I'm sure we're going to have some questions in the Q&A about that. But let's go to the bottom of the funnel and talk about how we can take signals from conversation, which often don't appear as signals in the moment. You're not necessarily like writing this down and saying, oh my gosh, this is the quote, this is the thing I want to bring up, but like using their own words. And I really want to make clear, not using them against them. This is not adversarial. We are using them for their own benefit. Like one of the things you said is that you knew you could help this customer. So it's not a bad thing. This is a good thing. We're using their own words to make that presentation, that proposal, that next step, just that much more tailored, that much more thoughtful. So we're doing a good job. We're being good salespeople, right? Not bad salespeople. And using engagement signals for the same purpose. We're gonna just tailor some things to what we know they're engaging with, even if it's not in live conversation. So let's break down this first play. We're calling it Memories of Disco, right? Disco died. We want to bring it back. Let's just think back to the discovery call, that conversation where we ask so many questions, right? We learned so much information. We're probably drowning in feedback. If we're doing a great job, we might be drowning in feedback, right? If it's not a one-sided discovery. And we want to take that and do something with it. What are some examples of things that you've done with things you've learned on discovery calls?
Yeah, I have a couple different plays. So typically when I'm running a larger deal, there is a point in time where I'll need to get on a call with multiple stakeholders.
Yeah.
And that could be like half the C-suite and a bunch of VPs and directors, which is like, whew, I'm pitting out right now. Just where's the AC?
Yep.
And what I found is that a really great way to frame the conversation is to basically summarize what I've heard from the discovery, and I create a slideshow which says here are the problems that have been articulated to me earlier on in the sales process. What am I missing?
Mm-hmm.
Can you stack rank these in priority? And what do you think the economic impact is of solving these?
Nice.
And that's how I start the conversation. And it and then basically I get to listen to a roundtable of all these people talking about, oh, well, this is what I think's going on, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm just pulling out those little tidbits as the
Yeah.
sales cycle progresses, going, okay, cool. So the marketing team thinks this is happening. And the director of sales thinks this is happening. And the sales engineer leader thinks this is happening. And then I go in and I weave that through the demo that I do later on. Then the next step is that, typically what we do is we move into a proof of concept. That's part of our sales cycle.
Sure.
So when I sit down with you to realign on what are we trying to solve, I pull back up that slideshow and I've, edited it and refined it based off of the last conversation we had. And I say, hey, are these still the problems that we're looking to solve in this proof of concept? And you say, yes or no. And then we reiterate and refine. And I say, if we can prove that we can solve these through this proof of concept, what would get in the way of us making a buying decision or moving forward with a partnership? So then I
Hmm.
can start pulling out the objections that might come up, what needs to go wrong, well, what do I need to make sure it doesn't go wrong?
Yeah.
Um, and then, when I come to the end of the process, again, I pull up that piece that is, it's a living, breathing document, and we realign on, did we meet these things? But throughout, I'm pulling in different quotes and different things that people are saying. So a really simple example, I'm in a proof of concept with a company. I ran a rep training on the software, and one of the reps said, um, I wish I had this software 10 years ago. So I took that and I sent it to the CEO in a pilot update email. There's no call to action, just saying,
Nice.
"Hey, quick update on your pilot. Want to
Yeah.
let you know we did the rep training. Here's how it's going. Oh, by the way, this person said this thing." And then I just sent him the 10-second snippet of the guy gushing about the software.
Very nice.
Um, so I do that throughout the sales cycle. I did the same thing. I presented to a CEO a couple weeks ago, and my main point of contact had been the VP of sales, and he had told me all of the ways that he thought this would impact revenue, but the CEO hadn't really been involved. And so I pulled all of these different quotes and embedded the snippets into the slideshow. So I presented it to him with direct quotes from the VP of sales, and then I sent it over so he could go and listen to those portions of the call if he felt compelled to. Um, so that's kind of how I'm like using the language of my prospects to help come to the decision if this makes sense for us to work together or not.
Look, and I can tell you, so at Opensense, when you hit us up, I think we had 3 sales reps. We're at 6 now, and we weren't really intending on getting customer success involved just yet. But by the way, they're all in there now. We freaking love it. But when we first started talking, we had pulled out some pain points, and there were some specific objections that I gave you. And I remember in a follow up email at one point, I'd responded to you saying something like, look, we're just not sure if we're ready. We're pretty small. And I'm sure that's a common objection when you work with early stage companies, but we're in growth mode. We feel like we'll be there eventually, kind of get back to us. And I remember, and I can't recall exactly what the detail was, but I remember this move where you said, you mentioned that these things were top of mind, that these are current issues, that you're trying to solve for them now. If we could solve that in a pilot or a POC, if we could get through that and solve for those issues, what would stand in the way? And it was kind of like, I mean, nothing. If that's truly what you can do. And ultimately that's what we did, right? I got to play with the software. Fortunately, you are backed by an incredible product team, and the software basically sells itself once you get it into your hands. But then you continue to do those things that were reminding me why I wanted to take an interest in the first place, reminding me why I wanted to buy, why I was willing to put kind of my head on the chopping block at a company where, we didn't have a ton of budget set aside for something like a break-in project, which a lot of outbound prospecting and selling motions are break-in projects. It was me putting my head on the chopping block and saying, look, if I botch this thing, we're kind of spending some money on it. And that's my head. I was willing to do that because you reminded me what I needed, what was going to make me move the needle for my own company, which is super exciting. So highly recommend this strategy. I think we've got an advanced version here, which is the one that you just brought up. So if you're fortunate enough to have Gong or a similar tool that can allow you to share snippets, there's this really dope feature where you can share actual audio recordings with the customer, with an outside person who's not in Gong. They don't have to go create a license and do all this fancy stuff. And it's a beautiful opportunity to share the more advanced version, which is like, listen to yourself say this in your own words, or listen to your rep and how excited she's getting when she gets to play with this tool, et cetera. So really cool opportunities if you've got the advanced version, right? So this is the next level up, which I know you obviously get to take advantage of there. But at the bare minimum, pay attention, write a few of those keywords, reference that in your materials later. It's going to help you close more sales for sure. For sure. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is an interesting one and maybe a little controversial, but because we all believe that the speed to lead and striking while the iron is hot is like the thing in sales, right? Sometimes we're very quick to react to prospect engagement. we'll see that signal and we just want to jump right on it, right? Oh my gosh, they're looking at my email. I better call them. I better do something really quickly. Um, Sometimes we need to encourage ourselves to look at the types of engagement they're giving us and say, all right, does that warrant a call? Are they just opening my email? Is now really the time to go interrupt them? Maybe they're in a meeting. Maybe I need to look, if they're going deeper, maybe I need to take that information and prepare it for my next presentation. And maybe I'm not going to hit them up right now. So we call this one slow your roll. And it's just a reminder to pay attention, right? If you're dying to do something, we say, go engage with them, on LinkedIn, go engage with them, their company, if they're not posting a lot. But there's some benefit to letting them push a little bit, right? Like pulling them in instead of pushing them in a direction. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about that email that I was talking about earlier. Man, if I could have seen, who was involved in looking at it and opening it, and where people are. But yeah, I think this is key, because wouldn't it be crummy if you cold called someone when they were like pulling up your unsubscribe page?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know we have a story. I won't mention the customer, but one of our current customers that one of our co-founders was engaged with, he could see some things that were happening that indicated to him, okay, at least they're doing what they need to in advance of our next call. We have a scheduled next event, and I can see that these things are happening, which means I don't need to do anything. I don't need to remind them. I don't need to bump this email. I don't need to send another copy or ask to make sure that it got delivered, that they saw it, because we could see that it was happening. So like he was able to kind of slow his roll, which in an enterprise sales cycle, the last thing you want is commission breath. In any sales cycle with any customer, you don't want them to feel like you need this. Oh my gosh, I got to have this. It's just not a good buying experience. But also it like loses all control. You're no longer in an equal relationship where you bring something to the table, they bring something to the table. So it's a powerful move. Pay attention to those signals. And I would say just slow your roll a little bit there. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do a lot of follow-up. Obviously, post-call, you can send individual follow-up to everyone. If you've got some advanced tracking, you can do things like sending a follow-up to everyone and then pay attention to individual activity. Some of the tracking that you might see out there is a little bit less advanced. It's not going to tell you. It's going to say someone opened or someone clicked, but there are tools out there that can tell you the deeper level of engagement. So I don't know, when you think about your own follow-up, do you do group follow-up post demo or post meeting with several people? Do you always separate it all out to individuals, or how do you think about it?
It depends. I don't know if I have figured out this tactic exactly
Yeah.
right, but I'll tell you what I'm doing, and then you've been selling a lot longer than me. You can tell me what best practice is. So sometimes I follow up with the entire group and I send all of the slides and all the good stuff, because, the questions that came up are all like pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
And then maybe after that happens, after I send that initial email, I might start single threading out of that first email um, with certain people to try to get their feedback, or try to get, whatever our next step is, nailed down. And then sometimes the other thing I do is, if someone was just like the squeaky wheel,
Mm-hmm.
or, they were the stick in the mud, I might try to single them out in a thread and just say, hey, I heard you were concerned about X, Y, and Z thing. I noticed that you had some questions about that. Would it make sense for us to grab time to take a deeper dive into your concerns?
Yeah.
And then maybe send over some white pages or resources around whatever it was that they weren't, totally into. So
Yeah.
that's sort of how I'm thinking about it, is, you know, all the information that everybody wanted, the copy of the call, the slide deck, blah, da, da, that can go out in a group, and then kind of single out the people that I want to talk to continue multi-threading. Because we found specifically at Gong in our commercial sales cycle, having a minimum of 4 people involved in a deal significantly increases our close rates. And for
Yeah.
my deals specifically, I have it's like a 68% higher chance of closing the deal if I have 4 people involved, versus if I have
Amazing.
1 person
Yeah.
involved, the likelihood that I close the deal is like 6%.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no,
very
that's really insightful. I think that there are times for everybody in a group message. There are times to separate it out individually. I think the thing that you will sometimes lose if you only send individually, like if you only send a tailored follow-up to everyone, is you don't actually get to see. You're probably not going to send them the recording and the playbook and the thing and the other thing and all this stuff. You're not going to overwhelm them because you're actually getting them to read specifically a message to them. You really want them to focus on the words in your message. So you're probably not going to drop all the extra stuff. So if
Hmm.
you can share that extra stuff, you might see some engagement. My favorite thing is when we see them downloading or viewing a proposal and we can see the replay of what's happening. You might never have known that. You might never have gotten the opportunity to identify some of those places where they're more engaged, that you thought you heard X, but because they were in front of their boss, they didn't say Y, right? So there's a lot of information that we can gather if we're doing both. So I think you're running some smart plays there. I can't say best practice for you, but I think you got a pretty good hold on it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be so cool if I could go in and see what slide are people spending time on, right? Like when they open your slide deck, what's the thing are they looking at? The
Yep.
security and compliance piece. Are they looking at the customer reference list? Like what is the thing that they're drawn to? How can you use that in your follow-up call? How
Yeah.
can you leverage it?
I mean, and frankly, that's what this play is used for. And there are a few tools out there who will allow you to upload documents where you can track and view. So we use the example of Opensense here. I know we have some of our customers on with us today, so they have the ability to do some of this stuff. But there's also a few other tools out there where if you send a tracked document specifically, then you'll have access to some of these features. But it's definitely worth attaching something that's more than one page, that's longer than 30 seconds, because you can't really gather a lot of intelligence from what someone did with a single page or a short video. They probably read it, they probably watched it. We don't learn a lot. So that rich media, that additional kind of contextual information that you can see, oh my gosh, they stopped here and spent a lot of time in this page. Why are they spent? We didn't talk about that. Oh crap. I better bring that up on my next conversation with them. I better make sure I'm prepared. I don't feel, maybe I'm a new rep. I don't feel super confident that I know what I'm doing on a security call. And I see that they're spending a lot of time on that issue. My gosh. All right. Hey, sales engineer, can you join me for this next call? Because I know this is going to come up and you're more prepared. You're not going to get caught looking like a fool. So we say attach that rich media, pay attention to those sorts of replays. You can get the information you can gather from that. So absolutely agree. Now, ultimately, our goal is to create more deals, right? We want to close more deals. I think the fun of sales is when you do it right, you're creating more value for your business, for yourself, and for your customer. And that's so fulfilling. It's crazy because you and I were at the very beginning of this talking about how we didn't get into sales because we love sales. We got into sales because this was like a thing that people thought we'd be good at, or it was a place that we could go to fulfill some financial needs, right? But ultimately, you can be really fulfilled in sales. We're in this incredible time with all this technology, all these signals, all these things we can do, and we can find a lot of fulfillment in that role. So I just think that we should emphasize this over and over again as sales professionals, because we often get told that sales is not an honorable profession, or people look down on it. I think it's the coolest profession in the world. I freaking love it. Second place close is marketing, because I also love marketing. But I think we have so much fun in this. We can smile when we talk about sales and not feel gross, not feel slimy, because there's so much value and fulfillment in that. I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well.
100%. I love sales. I didn't think that I would like it as much as I do. And I think sales done right is an exercise in empathy and persuasion and problem solving.
Mm,
So when I sit
yeah.
down and talk to you, the first thing I'm interested in doing is just getting to know what problems you might have. I'm not really focused on the sale, I'm focused on you. And as a result, I have learned so much about so many different kinds of industries. I've learned
Yeah.
about so many different kinds of sales cycles. I've just learned a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and from there, then we start to build a relationship, understand what your challenges are, and then I have to sit down and think, how do I get you from where you are to where you want to be? How can I do that and and get you to trust me
Yeah.
that this result will happen.
Mm.
Um, and that's really fun. That's really
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, if
Um,
you're a creative problem solver, it's one of the most fun ways to go about it, because you have so many people involved and so many challenges you have to overcome. Absolutely.
yeah, it's like a really fun choose your own adventure, like click and point adventure game where
Yeah.
there's a process and a means to an end, but everything is unique and different. And I've just met really, really cool people selling. I really love selling to the prospects that I sell to and my clients. Some of them will grind me down on price, and I'm working on it.
Yeah.
But even when that happens, it's still kind of fun
Yeah.
and exciting. So
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good attitude. And I think that's the one thing we can definitely control most of all is our attitude, our outlook, the way that we think about this stuff. And so you're one of my favorite people in sales for this reason. You can bring this kind of bright light to it. Just focus on the good that we can create here. And it's a lot of fun when you can do that. So before we break for Q&A here, I just wanted to mention, in case you haven't heard of Gong, which would be insane, but if you haven't, the one little note that I'll drop here is it used to be conversational intelligence. I've been paying attention to Gong for years and years before Chris Orlob, who's now there in a sales capacity leadership. He used to be at InsideSales.com with me, and I watched as he created kind of a competitive tool, and then went over to Gong, and I've been paying attention for years. And originally it was conversational intelligence. It was all about the things you could learn from a sales rep having a conversation live. There's so much more now. We hit on a lot of those conversational intelligence things though. If you're looking for what we call revenue intelligence, right? If we can go beyond just the conversation into how you manage your deals, things like that, I'm a huge fan. I post about it regularly. When people ask what tool they should use, I'm a big fan. I high five everybody from Gong about this. But I just want to mention that in case someone gets the mistaken impression that it's all about the conversation. There's a lot more than just that conversational intelligence. So, of course, those of you who are in attendance today or watching after the fact can, of course, contact us. Sarah, I've, of course, referred some folks to you. But let's go ahead and break. I'm going to bring in our Q&A here. And Tom, one of the good ones out there. Tom, thanks for this question. He said, you both sell to other salespeople. How often do you learn new sales techniques from your own prospects? And do you have a process for documenting those learnings and putting it into practice? Interesting. Sarah, why don't you tackle this one first? Do you learn anything by selling to salespeople about how to improve your own process?
Literally every day.
Yeah.
Part of my process is my first conversation is tell me about your sales process. Tell me about what your reps are doing. Tell me about what you think they should be doing and what you're afraid they're not. And just getting that context. And sometimes I learn really granular, tiny techniques about, maybe like something Chris Voss or Sandler selling, reversing, phrasing of a question, just those little things by listening to them and describing how their reps are selling. And sometimes I'm learning things that are more about process and setting expectations. I'm not documenting it in like an Excel spreadsheet, but maybe I should.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, Sarah, I've seen you document by sharing publicly what you're learning. It's one of the things I love about LinkedIn is like I share what my team's learning, what I'm personally learning. It's in fact what I've been doing for years is just, hey, figured this thing out. I better share it. Yeah, I think somebody could benefit from this. So yeah, definitely. As you're learning it, I know you're sharing because we've all benefited from some of those lessons from those of us who have followed your content for a while. Certainly, you may not have a formal process, but I think that's a really good way of if you're teaching someone else to do the thing, then you're probably learning the thing pretty well. But also, I think the key there is that you don't necessarily have to document it because you got to try it. You don't know that it's going to work better for you than what you're currently doing. So test it before you buy into that and change your entire process around it. But Tom, yeah, absolutely. We're all learning a ton from selling into salespeople. Now, lately, I've been selling more to marketing and IT, which has been a fascinating experience. I'm not on the front lines anymore, but I learned so much from the way that they're building their brands, the way they're managing their infrastructure. It's one of the most unique things about sales. You can learn so much. As Sarah, you were mentioning about different industries, different challenges they're experiencing. I don't care if you sell to the same industry in the same group of customers over and over. You can learn so much by just listening, by being a good, asker of good questions. So it's an awesome opportunity. So Tom, thank you for the question. Please, folks, continue to drop in the Q&A here. We've got another question. Kelly asked how we're seeing their engagement. So there's a number of tools available out there in the marketplace that have some degree of engagement intelligence. So I think you're probably asking this when we were talking about the email intelligence. So what's happening behind closed doors? Opensense is one. Outreach, who's a customer of ours, also has some degree of intelligence. SalesLoft, there's HubSpot. We use HubSpot. We're a Sales Pro user. They have some degree of intelligence. There are some other tools where if your marketing team uploads the document there, you can get a trackable link. So you can also see some intelligence there. So basically Google email tracking, and you're going to find a whole bunch of cool tools that can help you with that. But you can get a lot of learnings just from what's happening. It looks like Andres might have dropped in the note. The Agile is another cool one. I haven't heard of them. We'll have to check it out. It's fascinating.
I haven't heard of them either, but I might Google them.
Yeah, I know. We're going to all be Googling them after this. That's great. Well, it looks like we are close to the end here. Kelly, high five. Thank you for asking the question. Andres, good to see you, my friend. Everybody who joined us live, who's watching this after the fact, please pay attention to Sarah. She's got some good things to share with you. Sarah, where can people find you? I know LinkedIn is probably your favorite place to be, but are there other channels you're on as well?
I'm on LinkedIn. I just got invited to Clubhouse last week. I
Cool.
haven't done anything on Clubhouse. I'm just sort of lurking in a corner.
Can we all admit we should probably be wearing Mickey Mouse ears to go to club? I just feel like that's a thing, right? Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. My kids are young; they love that show. It just feels wrong. But no, I'm glad you're in Clubhouse. There's something unique about that experience. I hear. I haven't yet taken the leap. We got a lot going on. I haven't advanced into that level of coolness yet, but excited to hear you in Clubhouse. Okay. Is there any one way to find you in Clubhouse? Is just searching your name?
Yeah, I think you just at Sarah Brazier. I'm pretty sure.
Cool.
I mean, I've like click on Clubhouse a couple times, so we'll see what that actually turns into. But the main place to go if you want to engage with me and chat with me, or just read the silly things that I post on the internet, that's LinkedIn.
Very good. Very good. I'm there as well. Have been since, if you can believe it, the days when before you could do all these cool status updates and whatnot and these very long posts, you had to submit to get approved to publish articles on LinkedIn. That's how long I've been sharing on LinkedIn. It was way back in like 2013. It's my favorite platform so far. We'll see how Clubhouse comes along. Awesome. Please, folks, reach out to us. I know we got a couple of Q&A that we'll answer here, probably via email or on LinkedIn after the fact. But everybody, thank you for coming. Sarah, a real pleasure, of course, to have you with us today on the webinar.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always great to chat with you, Rex. I'm sure we'll probably do this offline very soon, because sales is like sadness. Corporate bro, sales is dope. Never
Sales
ever
are
stop.
dope. Never, ever stop selling.
Yep.
Absolutely. Shout out to Corporate Bro. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next time.